everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of Unboxed Healing. I'm Meredith, and I'm very excited to be here today with Liz. Liz, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your topic today.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to your show. I am Liz Flores Farrell, and I have a psychotherapy practice in Bloomfield, New Jersey called Mind Body Spirit Psychotherapy. And my specialty is trauma and spirituality. And with that, there's been a natural progression where I am now practicing Brainspotting, IFS, Somatic Therapy, and Ketamine Assisted Psychotherapy. I also work in psychedelic clinical trials with DMT and psilocybin. Yeah. So my topic today is integrating spirituality and psychotherapy, which I don't know why it's so taboo. Um, actually, maybe I do know why it's taboo. I think for a lot of us therapists, we're we're so focused on providing an evidence-based practice that many of us might fear um, moving away from that perhaps being a little off the cuff or a little more that where it cannot be boxed into this neatly packaged evidence base, and that's been a challenge with psychotherapy since the beginning of psychotherapy. It's a soft science, right? And as professionals, we're afraid to be labeled woo and everything that comes with that, and to be perceived as unprofessional. And obviously, religion is a contentious topic all over the world. And maybe, and perhaps there's that part of us that do not want to offend other people. But from my perspective, there is a relationship between trauma and spirituality. And and it and if these topic could be invited into the conversation, and these very intimate parts of the client could be invited into the room, it could really be to their benefit for healing. And it could be, and it is a very untapped source of healing for a lot of people. As a survivor myself, spirituality has been a big part of my own recovery. So I want to invite the define this, because spirituality can mean many different things to many different people. And when I refer to spirituality, I'm referring to this connection, a connection to something greater than us, something beyond us. So it's not just about belief, and I think this is where people get tripped up, so it's not just about what you believe or how you believe. It's about the action and a state of being. And when we have experienced trauma, many of us are very disconnected from ourselves, from others, from what's greater than us. So this is, I want to invite the idea that this is relational, that this and psychotherapy is about relationships. Psychotherapy is relational inherently. So this is, to me, more about our relationship with ourselves from like the IFS perspective, self with a capital S, and the mystery, the mystery of our purpose, and the state of being is, how could we open our hearts, right? How can we be with that mystery? that we're all engaging with. So to start with, I just want to share that in my questionnaire, when people come to my practice, I include a question. I specifically state that this is a holistic practice, and would they like to incorporate spirituality into the psychotherapy? And if they do, like, do they have certain practices already, certain rituals that they engage with? And sometimes people say no, and that's okay. So, right, we want to always give people choice. So, in essence, I strive to provide a safe space, a safe container for people to process experiences that are inexplicable sometimes, sometimes even nonverbal, um, and from a non-judgmental perspective, from the perspective that I don't know everything. I'm on my own healing journey. I'm on my own spiritual journey, but perhaps I could offer a perspective that would resonate with a client. And oftentimes I'm learning a lot from my own client. I've had clients that have transpersonal experiences, either because they have sought them out with medicines or without medicines. It's very, very possible to have all sorts of transpersonal experiences, sometimes spontaneously. Um, and people sometimes need to integrate, whether it's the transpersonal experiences, beliefs, or just even to talk it out to as they're working their way towards what that belief that's evolving. And synchronicities. I am from the belief that the divine communicates through synchronicities, and sometimes people need to unpack that. They need to integrate that. Like, this is what I noticed, and this is what I'm seeing in nature. This is what I'm experiencing, and it feels too greater to be just a coincidence. And I support people in their psychospiritual growth, because that's ultimately what this is about. It's about our growth. So I often start off by asking people what are their earliest experiences with spirituality and religion, and just kind of check to see if there's religious trauma. This is really important. A lot of us are carrying religious trauma, whether we're aware of it or not. Um, there's, for a lot of people, there's the fear of persecution. If I practice this, will they come for me? Will I be how will I be perceived? And and it and a lot of people, depending on the religion that they grew up with, might be carrying um, some difficult feelings that they need to work through, in regards to concepts of sin. Um, I've worked with people who as very young children felt very traumatized by teachings of end of time teachings, and that lived every day like with this constant fear that one day there's going to be a reckoning and they're not going to make it, that they are filled with sin, and that's really challenging, because how do you speak of that to your community? um, so I've worked with quite a few people, who need to unpack that. And then there's the other challenge in being a spiritual person, or having and maintaining hope and the belief, is for people who've experienced trauma, is right this there's that rift, and coming back to the idea of spirituality being relational, is that perhaps they need to work out their relationship with God, and that maybe they felt abandoned when their trauma happened, right? How do we reconcile with senseless violence? It's, especially when it happens at a very young age. I hear people say, "Why would God allow this?" So that these things could lead to serious religious trauma. Um, and I often ask people what language they're okay with, right? That's really important. Also because of the religious trauma. Some people are not okay with the word God. And I'm hearing a lot of my clients use the word spirit, and I find that to be lovely, and that resonates with me as well. And I've heard people say that they are not comfortable with words like energy because it reminds them of this cultish like communities, or conspiracy theories, or things that are going on social media that are a little too fringe, and that's okay. Right, so we're at the service of our clients, so we go with whatever language they like to use, and that in itself could be an exploration, right? If there's a concern about certain groups, and cult-like mentality, it makes sense, right? Groupthink is scary. Right, as a therapist, I say that I'm not here to tell you um, what and how to believe, but just to support your process, to support the connection that they're building.
Love that.
Yes. And also because the therapy, it's a relationship, the therapeutic relationship. I we might be missing, when spirituality is not invited into the room, we might be missing like some of the most deeper parts of the client. I've had clients tell me, this is what I couldn't tell my other therapist, and
Mm.
then just name something that just totally blows me away. Um, right,
Yes.
right,
You've
right.
just,
This is about, go on.
I just wanted to say, like, you have just brought up so many, every point that you're making, my brain is like, yes. And some things even I haven't identified for myself and in my own practice and in like my own spirituality, even as relational, and just so many of these points that you're touching on, like, oh yeah, like maybe it has been that fear of like, being seen as too woo or but this is, as you're talking, I'm thinking like this is exactly what we're bringing here is like unboxed healing, like ways to depathologize, because it is so, it's such, and as you're talking about, the more I'm thinking about it, is so significant and such a huge part of identity, regardless of which way it goes.
It's a big, it is one of the biggest parts of our being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all currently suffering from disconnection. And spirituality is about the connection. And sometimes it involves community, and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't have to. Um, but ultimately, right, we do long for community. and relationship with nature and beyond, right? Some questions that I might ask a client is, what is sacred to you? I have learned that even for somebody who is atheist and does not consider themselves spiritual, they're okay with the word sacred. And I have learned that sometimes people who say that they're not spiritual could actually be the most spiritual people. I used to teach yoga and many, many years ago. And when I was teaching yoga, I kind of needed to explore this part of myself in the and reconcile and try to understand this the cultural appropriation and as and what I discovered is that I that I am disconnected from my ancestral wisdom and and that I was longing for wisdom and there weren't or they rather they aren't any avenues for me to experience wisdom. You know, typically ex we rely on our elders to provide us with sacred knowledge, to initiate us and teach us about traditions, rituals. And what I learned about myself is that oh, okay, this is why, well, I can't speak for others, but this is how I ended up um, in this conundrum of finding this practice that is sacred to me and that I love, but it is in a cultural appropriation. And that I do my best to practice with humility and reverence. So that leads me to working with folks is this question of, well, where do you get your wisdom from? And it might be from Ram Dass, right? Or or it might be from I don't know, from stargazing, or it might be just from putting your ear down to the ground. Yeah, like it I invite that it's this is an exploration. Like it could be simple.
And I wonder how many people feel like missing that connection of like learning from elders because just, in society, how we've gotten kind of far away from like, many generations living even like in the same state, right? Or same, right? So it really does it makes sense, some of the disconnection or like longing for wisdom or being unsure, or like you talked before about what would happen if I tried this other way. And like then there's also a piece of what, sense of obligation to one's, religion or whatever they were brought up with, right? So like shifting away from that and what would that be like? So there's so many different elements, and I love how you're bringing to this that it can be simple and it can be your own, and it is okay to explore and be curious about what you received or didn't receive, from your lineage.
In my own personal journey, I'm as many Latinx people. I I have ancestors that are European, but I also have indigenous ancestors, and there's that disconnection. My grandmother was indigenous, and I don't know anything about her lineage except what I have Googled myself, and it's hard to gain that knowledge because it was a dead language. It is a dead language. It is not a thriving community anymore. So, right, for some people, this could also be about identity, right, and that loss, right, and with that comes grief, right, like what's missing. Um, not even entirely sure that there's something missing, but just trying to reclaim this part of yourself that you could feel. I ask my clients what kind of practices they have, and and that will surprise you. People have These are very intimate moments, and people have practices that you may not even be aware of. And if they don't, I really do encourage people to start a daily practice, even if it's just slowing down, feeling the sun in your face for a few seconds, closing your eyes. We have we have really shifted away from matriarchal cultures and earth-based cultures, and in the matriarchal cultures, there's more of an emphasis on intuition and the wisdom that comes from within and that comes from the body. So I also want to offer that spirituality is somatic. It is in the body. And a lot of these practices are about becoming receptive. It's like, how do we shift? How do we integrate the head and the heart? How do we integrate our higher self and our lower selves? How do we shift into a more receptive state? Um, People have meditation practices, gratitude practices, and I support that. I support developing intuition because we all have that capability, right? With common sense. I think this is where the fear comes in, that right, it's taboo to rely on intuition, that it's not common sense, it's not logical sometimes. But there's practices that help us to channel, working with doing altar work, observing the cycles of the moon, ancestral observance, embodiment practices, purification, concentration, consecration, forgive me, breath work. I work with astrology and tarot, and they're sacred tools. They're vehicles for receiving sacred knowledge and deeper knowledge of yourself. If my client is open to it, I might show them the Fool's Journey, which is the major arcana of the tarot, And using their astrology birth chart, I could help them pinpoint where they are in this archetypal journey, and what are the themes that are really strong in their lives, and and ultimately their soul's purpose. And it often resonates with people. And if it doesn't, you take it or leave it. It's okay. It's um, more than anything, it's for fun. I had a client who was practicing something called Examine. It's a Jesuit practice, and I think, and it just felt like such an honor that he would come to sessions with this. So it's the set of questions that you ask yourself every day. And one of the questions is, where throughout my day, where did I notice the divine? Yeah, where did I, and it's often subtle. And it also includes gratitude.
And synchronicities, right? Like you said before.
Yeah, synchronicity is another name for that. Yeah, I have clients who are energy healers, they practice mediumship, and who are seekers, and they often go to professionals for readings. And I find that sometimes people need to integrate and unpack an Akashic reading that they may have received. That some things are surprising, sometimes it's startling, or um, even if it resonates, even if it's exciting, sometimes they need to process that. And psychotherapy is a perfect place to do that. Right? We talk a lot about integrating psychedelic experiences,
Yeah.
right? But we also need to integrate psychic readings.
Mm.
Uh, give you an example. I have a client, and with her permission, she she gave me permission to share a little bit about her process. She, for many years, when she would attend her a religious service and retreats, she would have these moments in which she would become very overwhelmed, and all of a sudden she would start picking up on information, and she was essentially becoming a channel. and she knew who was grieving in the room. She would know these very intimate things of the people in the room, but she would be so overwhelmed that she needed to lie down, or it would become a little too much. And I took a therapeutic risk in saying to her, have you considered training? Have you considered refining this skill and learning more energetic boundaries so that you don't become sick and overwhelmed? Right. So integrating spirituality and psychotherapy could also be about providing that guidance, and that so it turns out that she is now a professional medium.
Wow.
Yeah, she did a year-long training with a professional medium, and she now provides readings for people and is thriving. And she no longer has those episodes in which she becomes overwhelmed and sick, because now how to she knows how to shut down and how to turn it back on. Right? Because for people who are naturally sensitive, we need to learn those boundaries. We need to learn the energetic boundaries. And but it's also not necessarily ethical to go into the grocery store and start giving off unsolicited reading. Um, Sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes there's the person feels called to share something with you, and that'll change something about your life. But it could be a lot. It can be a lot when you're feeling everything at once.
Well, and especially if there's been messaging in the person's life that like that's crazy or wrong. So I just imagine like this client that you share about, I imagine that some layers of shame, maybe even about.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, there's shame that people could experience because from a religious perspective, you're not supposed to be you're not supposed to be communicating with the dead. You're not supposed to be like it could be considered sacrilegious to have these experiences. So right then that causes people to alienate and to shut this part of them down when this part of them could be a real source of strength.
Yeah, it makes so much sense to me as you're speaking um why you're drawn to parts work specifically, and it really does have me thinking because it is a more gentle way even to for people to access these different parts that right like that maybe haven't received attention from them or received negative attention from others, and being able to acknowledge and validate that. I mean, just look at the example you gave. Like this, you really gave permission, right, to that part to say like, no, you can exist, like you can thrive
Yeah,
actually.
live authentically.
Authentically.
Yeah, it's okay to be yourself. Yeah. And wanna and adding to that conversation is that people might have dreams that are, like in Jungian terms, big dreams. And how do we support that? Right? If the client feels shame, it's just gonna shut it down. Right. And sometimes the big dream could take years to integrate. I've had clients who have shared that they've had visitations from deceased loved ones, and right, and just what tender and emotional this is to have this kind of experience. And the last thing we as therapists should do is shut it down. And how much it deepens trust when we do hold that and we do take it seriously, as opposed to saying, oh no, you're you're imagining that. That's just your brain firing in these specific ways,
Right.
right? That could be really shaming. Yeah, I I come to this idea that a lot of this is about meaning making, but also inviting hope into our lives. And from the IFS, in IFS terms, there's the idea of the hope merchant, right? So this part of them, the part of them that is feeling connected and feeling safe to engage with something greater than them, that part is the hope merchant. And especially for our clients who are vulnerable and are working towards wholeness and working towards healing trauma.
Yeah. And I wonder, for how many folks it's really hard to separate or differentiate spirituality from religion.
Yeah. Yeah, I often say there's religious people who are not spiritual, and there's people who are spiritual who are actually not spiritual. Um, and there's people who say who are not spiritual and are actually very spiritual. And but it's there's also people who are religious and just very deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
Like it comes down to the connection, and unfortunately what happens is that when you grow up in the context of a religion, sometimes we might feel that we cannot connect directly. Like you need permission, or you
Mm.
need somebody in between. You need an authority. The authority connects with the divine, and then they relay the information to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so interesting.
And so if you have that underlying belief, then you're not going to lean into your gifts. You're not going to develop your intuition, and just see what happens.
Yeah. So, in the beginning, you talked about spirituality being relational and right, like that sometimes that's community. And I think in some sense, oftentimes folks will lean into religion for the community piece, and it can be that, right? It may or may not be
Mhm.
that. But there's also the relational piece, like with self. It's
Mhm.
very much that, right? Of well, in a lot of different layers, like what do I actually believe? Like so getting personal about do my spiritual beliefs align with what I've been taught? And then right, the self with the capital S of like who am I even, right? Like I mean that's like a whole nother.
Right. Right. And right, as people who are psychedelic therapists, we see this. I I hope you've seen it. I've seen it in sessions where people will have a mystical experience, and they'll start to question the things that they've been taught, or that perhaps, and not necessarily that they need to abandon their their beliefs frameworks, but maybe just expand upon it.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we've been seeing this with um with more of a microscope, but where we could use a fisheye lens now.
Yeah. Oh, it's almost like you're picking up on exactly my experience right now. But it's something that I think about a lot. And Liz, I gotta be honest with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many things I need to bring to my next therapy session because it's such a big piece and there's so much that around it in like in all different layers. Um, and then this idea that, okay, I can still acknowledge, respect, and participate to the extent that feels right to me in what I learned and in my heritage. And it doesn't have to be a but, right? And I can also expand on that. I really love that idea.
And you're touching upon something else is that most of us are we really get caught up in this dichotomy and the duality, and that things are this, it has to be either this or that, and it can never be both or the in between.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and I love that you brought up, like just psychedelics and altered states that can be with or without medicines, because I I think we're seeing this shift towards this like openness and curiosity and really diving deeper into this part of the field. And so how could it not intersect with spirituality, right? Because
Absolutely.
I think people really want to connect with something, and sometimes it is those altered states that help folks access that, and expand that. And so,
And I'm also finding is psychedelic experiences lead people to start embodiment practices,
yeah.
to to ritual practice, and explore what does that mean for them to have a daily ritual, to have a practice that helps them drop down to their hearts, to tune in to a different vibration.
Yeah. And the layer of exploration that you brought up, that goes along with recognizing cultural appropriation too. I know for me, that was, I was also trained in classical yoga, and then exploring the concept of cultural appropriation really felt similar to how you described.
Uh,
And also then led me to, well, learning more about this culture, and or even like, right, like this plant medicine, and it's the history of, who used these plant medicines. I'm like, wait, and I can explore my own too, and like where does that take me? It's it really expansive.
right, all religions have a mystical side,
Yes.
and I know it's hard, sometimes it's hard to access that, um,
Yeah.
but all religions have their mystical counterpart, right? There's the exoteric, that's what most of us receive, and then there's the esoteric, and that's more, that's deeper.
Yeah.
I say put it out to the universe. Just invite it in. Just verbalize it. Say, I put me in the path, um, and you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at what lands on your lap.
Beautiful. Yeah. So usually at about this time we open up for any questions. There are a couple of people here. If you want to take yourself off mute or put a question or thought in the chat, you're more than welcome to, and also no pressure if not.
Just want to thank you both for the conversation. It's really intriguing. I do spiritual emergence coaching myself, so I became certified and now I help teach the certification. So it's really nice to see this conversation opening up more and more. And I went to Brazil last year to learn at Spiritist hospitals and centers. So I just feel like, yeah, there's a lot of hope that's infiltrating in. So from my perspective, like you, for us to be holistic in the way that we approach each individual and see each individual, is being open to their spiritual aspect of them as part of their healing journey or their integrative journey, whatever you want to call that. Yeah, maybe a question I do have is if you're seeing this in your practice, where what we may be working with an individual is their spiritual journey and things that they're having, like psychic openings, things like that, where their primary care physician may be apt to pathologize that and label
Yeah.
it as something different. So, yeah, I've just seen that a few times with some of my clients. So hopefully there's a shift as our worldview, changes in the Western medical culture to include people's experiences that are beyond the five senses, and not as pathology, but as a maybe a part of our spiritual evolving. Yeah.
It is so good to see you, Lorna, and thank you so much for bringing this very important topic of spiritual emergencies. Um, this is a very serious thing, and it's very important for us therapists to be able to recognize it. Is that me giving a thumbs up? Like it's just Zoom stuff.
It might be me. I'm holding my
Oh,
T with my thumb up, so I think it's just sending up.
well, thumbs up to the question. Um, yeah, I have not actually. Let me rephrase this. Where I'm more, what I see more in my practice is that people are learning to practice discernment, and they're afraid to share things like that with their medical providers because they are afraid to be labeled psychotic. And so this is where it's important for us therapists to also be able to distinguish the difference, and that intuition is very different from psychosis, right? And when somebody is experiencing a manic episode, that, right, we could, very basic questions that we all learn: how are they eating, how are they sleeping, how are they functioning? And that intuition and what's intuitive is not impacting the person's quality of life in that way. That it shouldn't be that they're no longer able to function. Um, but sometimes people can have very expansive experiences where it that does happen, and right, where we're open. And this is where I offer that this is why the daily practice and that gentle opening could be so helpful. That gentle learning of how to connect and how to drop down, and the example that I gave of my client, learning energetic boundaries, as opposed to being cracked open, wide open, and all of a sudden it's life feels very jarring.
Yeah, sometimes a breakdown could be more like a breakthrough. And sometimes what I see in your clients, you hear everyone's stories and really honoring their paths. And sometimes you see a pattern. I've seen this where, and even myself, right? You're not tuned in to that intuition. And so there may be subtleties, that subtle cues coming through that's kind of saying you're kind of not living in harmony, like with who you truly are inauthentically, right? The more you ignore those, I find that the louder they will get. And then sometimes maybe people wait until it becomes loud in the form of a crisis. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Hmm.
you for offering that. Right. Like it will start to gnaw at you when you keep when you keep ignoring intuition. That's something that I often support people in, like recognizing. The other thing that I see a lot in my practice is people who are very spiritual and do have an practices and an ability to connect with intuition, but sometimes have a hard time discerning what's rumination and what's anxiety, right? And then I remind people, intuition is it's a still voice. It's a still deep voice. Mhm. And it's not going to be fear-based. It's not going to be emotional. That one's a tough one. Sometimes it's hard to discern.
Well, you mentioned IFS. I don't know if you had a chance to see Dick Schwartz's most recent, it's kind of an online modules offering that just came out this past Monday. And it's the spirituality of IFS. So he's coming out with some things that he's experienced over the past 20 years that he feels much more comfortable talking about. So, in this spirit of being how people are uncomfortable to even say things to their primary care physician or their therapist, hopefully, with him doing this and others, that this is a much more open conversation so people don't have to fear it so much. So I was really excited I watched his first module. It was lovely. And yeah, it's really nice that it's coming out in the IFS world.
Thank you for sharing that, Lorna. And also, I want to add also for us therapists to feel safe to talk about this because it could really feel isolating, alienating, and that it feels provocative to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Also, Lorna, did you name the training? Maybe you want to state the name because that's an important resource.
Yeah, thank you. It's through Integrative Mental Health University. So they train here in Europe and also in Australia. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for really just I, we were talking before this. This could be like a four-part conversation. I think like each of the parts of this that you brought up could be like a full hour conversation. So what's the best way for folks to connect with you if they want to, either meet with you for a session or consult with you about this kind of thing?
My website is mindbody psych mindbodyspiritpsych.com, and they can email me at liz@mindbodyspiritpsych.com.
Great.
And I also, before we end, want to also include, right, just to kind of wrap things up, that this is a lot about meaning making and hope, especially for our clients who are recovering from trauma. And I often think of this. I also think of uh, Viktor Frankl and how he would say that he could tell by the look in people's eyes when he was in a concentration camp. He could tell who was going to survive because they had their hope and their faith intact, and that connection was still there. Um, and they're able to go on and create meaning. I offer that healing is a spiritual journey.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks again, Liz, for this meaningful conversation. And we will see you next week for episode 7.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye now.
Bye.